Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom with your host, Bill Stierle. And Bill, I'm really excited to speak with you today because as we are recording this episode, we have had the first, I'll call it the first, although it's really part A and part B, debates on the Democratic side of the aisle. And wow, what I really took away from that, I mean, obviously there were some big moments and some people stood out and some other people didn't. But to me, it's like, wow, what a tough environment and situation with 60 seconds of an answer to communicate to the country your vision and why they should, be in your camp. And boy, what a tough situation. What did you think?
Well, it was really tough because messaging is, everything. Are you ready to answer a question or are you ready to make an impact? Which one are you going to do? And many times, answering the question is not how you make an impact. How you make an impact is the ability to come in and say a sentence that is going to be able to connect deeply with the person so they can see that you are more of the leader, that you are the person commanding the room, that you're the person that has the confidence and the confidence, not necessarily the ability, but the confidence to deal with toughness and tough issues and tough moments of communication. But regrettably, what happens is that people get caught in the weeds answering the question. They get caught in trying to land their talking point. What do they want to be known by? Instead of being identified as a communication communication master that can lead things going forward. And it's a lot of people think they could do it, but it's easier said than done. It just kind of is. So.
And somehow, Bill, I'm sort of wondering if this takes us back to an earlier episode in that, some obstacles that maybe got in the way for some of these candidates.
It does take us back to an earlier episode now, and we'll have to fish out which one. But I remember that we had a huge impact on this when we talked about the 4 horsemen of a communication apocalypse. And a candidate's truth, if a candidate is going to have the truth, they've got to be able to handle and resist using the 4 horsemen. Resist it. When you do, what happens is that you become a adversary to the person that they're going to be an adversary. But more importantly, you bring all the baggage of that horseman into the conversation. All the baggage. So let's just go through the 4 horsemen again so you can see what those things are and you can see where the baggage is. Okay. So horseman number 1 is the horseman called criticism. As soon as you use criticism, what winds up happening is anybody that has had a tragic experience with criticism, they'll say, hey, don't criticize the other person. Don't criticize this. Now there is, and we're going to get to this at the end, is how do you use an impact without using criticism? So far, so good?
Sounds great.
That's number 1. Number 2, defensiveness. As soon as you go to defensiveness, even though you're advocating for truth, you're going to get creamed. And the post, people are going to go like, why was he or she so defensive? Well, because it brings up all the baggage that defensiveness brings. You remember a defensive spouse. You remember a defensive parent. You remember, a defensive moment where all of a sudden you felt really crappy because you were defending a truth, but that was not helpful. Okay?
Yes.
All right, number 3, contempt. The experience of saying, hey, this makes me sick. You broke the relationship. This is not the kind of people we are. And as soon as you put contempt to somebody else on stage, contempt to a situation, or a contempt, in this case, to Donald Trump, you will bring up all the baggage of contempt. And it's all coming forward. And then the candidate has got to have that on their shoulder and then create a difficult message. And then they're going to have a lot of trouble because now all of a sudden, yes, they scored a point. They might have won the battle, but they're going to lose the war. Okay. Now, number 4, the 4th horseman is withdraw and stonewalling. These 2 particular concepts are in the same group. So if I'm withdraw, I am backing up and being quiet on stage. I might be compassionately or respectfully allowing the other person things, but actually the audience and everybody is seeing me shut down. They're not seeing me having an active role. I'm letting somebody else slug it out. And withdrawing and or stonewalling is basically right now, regrettably, whether you agree with this or not, is kind of what, the administration is doing right now to the courts as well and the Congress. Oh, you guys are in charge. We're stonewalling you. We're not sending any of our people because that's the way we're playing it. We're going to run out the clock, stonewalling and withdrawing. Get the American people tired of you and your ranting of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and withdraw. And we are not going to pay attention to because the court can be something that you can stretch out and actually tire out. You can tire out the defendant. You can tire out the money people. You can run out their money, which Trump has done. He's used the courts to starve people that he owed money to.
Right.
He just used the court and run them out. Why? Because I have this big bucket of change over here that I can spend with my attorneys to run the clock out. And you little contractor, you architect, yes, I had a signed contract, but I'm not paying you. And you could sue me, and you could be right, but I have more money than you, and I'm going to run out the clock. And I'm not going to pay you.
Yeah, that's exactly what he has done. Very, very frustrating. And we've seen that, obviously, even the run up to the last election, all the reports on that. And
I'm going to run out the clock.
Yep.
Hey, Tom, I promise this. They'll see my tax records.
Oh, sure.
We're sitting 3 years in, and we haven't seen the tax records. Yeah, you know what? They're auditing it. Auditing what? Is there any word when the audit's going to come back?
Oh, no. If he has his way, he'll be in perpetual audit.
He is not showing those things because there's the possibility of it showing something. And the probability, the way, some other investigators and other people are getting to, that there's some stuff on there that is kind of pretty junky and is not going to be very respectful and is not going to be high in integrity. It's not going to have the quality, that, we would like, in the experience.
Sure.
So,
well, okay. So how can we look at some of the candidates and see where they maybe got trapped in some of the 4 horsemen and maybe even, talk eventually about what they could have done differently. I think
Sure.
that would be really fun to do.
Yeah, I think so too. The first one comes to mind where Kamala Harris and Joe Biden got into their major piece, and Tom, I'm worried about my dog barking. Can you hear him in the back?
I cannot.
Okay, he needs to be let out. Hold on a second.
All right, sure.
Pause.
All right, yep, no problem. Editors, I'll pause the recording slightly so I don't have a lot of dead air, and then I'll turn it back on, just edit the stuff out, and we'll come back to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Okay, all right,
editors,
it's out of my head at least.
Oh, good.
Right.
All right, editors, we're going to pick back up here. All right, so you were talking about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Why don't you start that piece over again?
So one of the biggest challenges, Tom, is how the voices of criticism and defensiveness and contempt and withdraw, how those voices, those styles of language, those tactics of protection, because they're all really just protective strategies, how they will get you a temporary win. And you will get a boost. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win the battle.
Okay.
Win the war. You're going to win the battle, but you might not win the war, actually, because the access of criticism, the access of defensiveness, contempt, and withdraw will create a bitterness, and will actually start to lose respect points and integrity points as a candidate and or a president. It will just lose those.
Okay.
And this is the thing to really kind of get a hold of, is that these tragic messages and these tragic strategies will do that. Okay. So one of the things that happens is that if somebody is like Vice President Biden, becomes and moves into a place of defensiveness. How did he get there? How did he get to the defensiveness? And what could he have done differently not to get stuck in that corner? The criticism was clear. Would you vote differently about busing? Busing affected a lot of people. Would you vote differently? How many years ago was that?
Oh my gosh, it was
a light year,
right? Yeah.
How's he gonna take his brain today and go back there and fix that? He was just doing the best he could at that time.
Sure, but nobody thinks about that or said that, right?
Nobody thought about it. So she goes, as Kamala Harris goes, if you were going back and looking at that, would you think differently and do something differently back then? He's going like, what? What happened back then? So he's not ready. He's not ready to respond to that.
Yeah, he wasn't prepared for it. And
his brain went to the only languaging strategy it knew: defensiveness regarding truth. That's all it knew. It didn't know what to say back to her.
Yeah, and it sort of sounded like, and I know this isn't the same thing, but it was almost like the argument, well, I first voted against the war before I voted for it. And it becomes explanation.
It becomes explanation. Instead of compassion for the impact and compassion for the decision. That's what was needed next. Joe's next best response is, you had a tragic experience, or better yet, is that this experience affected you deeply, and race is something deeply that divides us as Americans. And as president today, I would use different thinking than I did back then as a public leader. Back then, we were doing the best we could to deal with racial tensions at that time. People who were trying to figure out how to get a divided nation back together again. Just like today,
Wow.
as a leader, as the president, we have to read things. And the things that you experienced back then, the same things that are happening today, clearly we have a way to go. Whether it's in South Bend, Indiana, which would now take Pete Buttigieg out.
Oh, wow.
Whether it's South Bend and the things that Mayor Pete's dealing with, or dump.
That would have been brilliant. And if he could have kept his head about him, but I think he got to the place of contempt where he was personally offended.
So he went from defensiveness to contempt, and now he's stuck. And she moves up 10 points in the polls.
Oh, she hijacked the whole event right there. And I think to the world, to a lot of the world is too strong. I think to a lot of Americans who watched that debate, which by the way, apparently was people 55 and older for the most part watching it.
Was it really?
That's some of the stats that came out. That's a whole nother interesting dynamic that we'll have to get into in the future. But for the people that watching, I think that a lot of them, while they like, Uncle Joe, who's been with us for a long time, they in reality are like, well, she is African-American. He can't understand that. I mean, they get to more black and white thinking, pardon the unintended pun, because that was really
sure. It is. No, it is.
Yeah.
It's exactly. Yeah. It's both all or none kind of an experience. And, it is the all or none, always, never, can't, couldn't, should, shouldn't, all those language of polarizing thinking that shows up. And her experience, her story as this young girl that had to deal with busing and racism, that, had to go through that experience of confusion, of bewilderment, of what is race? We want to play with this kid, and this kid won't play with us because the mom won't let play with us. And she gets to bring out that story, which is true. And it creates a moment of compassion first, but then it drips into sympathy. And she then launches into a moment of criticism. Back then, would you have used today, would you use a different decision than you did back then? And he's stuck in, how can I defend this? Because the truth is, I was the vice president of an African-American president. How could I not be an advocate for?
Sure. And of course, he gets defensive in this and says, I don't have a racist bone in my body. It doesn't matter what you say in that regard, it isn't going to be received well. But you're absolutely right. If he had gone into it with compassion for her and acknowledging that it's different today than it was then, I mean, boy, wouldn't that have been so much different? The pendulum would not have swung so far over to Kamala Harris. It really would have probably stayed much more in Joe Biden's court.
Think of it as like this, Tom, is that you and I are moving through the field of time. This is like one of those, profound moments. Okay, you and I are moving through the field of time. And as we're moving through the field of time, there's these different dominoes that are being set up. Okay, we're putting the dominoes down as a nation. We're putting the dominoes down as two human beings. We're putting dominoes down of language. Okay?
Yep.
And in those events, different people are having different experiences with those different dominoes that are being set up. And people are building evidence and validation about what their perceived truth is about the world. They're building evidence based on, here it comes, one of the first dominoes that got set down. That's what they're doing.
Okay.
So, Tom, if you have parents that got divorced, I think that's a part of it. And I have parents that stayed together.
Right, that's true.
Our dominoes are very, very different regarding relationship, right?
Right.
Okay, great. If Joe Biden has the experience of, white middle class Americans, and Kamala Harris has the experience of African American growing up the way she did, in her experience, and she has that set of dominoes. The only way to get to those moments of truth is to, just like dominoes, is that you've got to deal with it in this moment. You can't be defensive about that moment. That moment's already indefensible.
Okay, good point.
I can't say, gosh, Tom, if your parents only would have, or mine is, gosh, my parents' relationships had some, they stood together, but man, what a rough ride. I can't, it's like, if they would have. Now, all of a sudden, I'm sitting in a place of criticism. All of a sudden, I have to defend them, or you have to defend your experience. All of a sudden, there's moments of contempt that shows up in our bodies. And then all of a sudden, the moment of withdrawal is, gosh, I don't want to talk about this because it was too damn painful. That's where the conversation gets lost on, is that we get caught in a language nuance and style of should, shouldn't, can't, couldn't, right, wrong, good, bad, truth, non-truth, my perception, your perception. We get caught there instead of the moment of compassion for both Kamala Harris's experience growing up, African Americans' experience today. That's where the win was for Joe. That's where the win was. The win was compassion for her experience. It must have been difficult growing up as an African American back then. There is no way I could ever have that same experience that you had. This is one of the really important moments that we as Democrats need to unite around, because that is the thing that will divide us. And right now we have a divider in chief in charge.
Yeah.
And this, it's creating points for him. It's creating his people, the ones that are believing that there is a thing called other in the United States. We're human beings here. Our unique strength as Americans are. See what has just changed, Tom?
Oh my gosh, it would be an absolute game changer in that debate. And the interesting thing I'm wondering now, as we're talking about this, is, Kamala Harris on that night on the debate stage was the only person, the only black person on the stage. And she actually used that and said, hey, I'd like to, she interrupted at one point, said, hey, I'd like to comment on that since I'm the only black person on the stage. She actually said something like that and inserted herself in a conversation. And she used her experience to make a statement, to make a big point. But I'm not even so sure that was her communication skill the best it could have been right there, or did she just made the biggest point that no one else on the stage had the skills to be able to have that conversation with her? And so she won the battle. Did she run out the clock, so to speak, because no one else was prepared, or was it a really good communication point regardless? I mean,
now there's that she is, it was really, as a litigator, criticism is one of the strategies that lawyers use in the courtroom. Criticism of and picking the nuance of truth and framing the nuance of truth to look the way they would like. And, it was a little bit of a circling, a circular firing squad moment. She took a shot across the circle.
Right.
And he could have turned it to, we're all standing here unified. He could have unified all the 10 people on the stage as well as the other 10 that weren't there. He could have unified the whole thing.
And it could have been like he put on a bulletproof vest, or everybody had one on, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Everybody hey, listen, we're one thing that we're good at, we can fight cleanly. We can fight cleanly? Yes. I can clearly see that whatever Senator Harris went through is something that I did not. But as somebody that has supported African American issues. And yes, my mind is different today. My maturity, my wisdom, my experience now has taught me.
Wow. Talk about being the adult in the room.
Be the adult in the room.
Wow.
Don't be the defensive person trying to clarify truth that she was impacted by a state's choice. True, but not helpful. Say it back to me and I'll start feeling better. True and not helpful.
True, but not helpful. Very interesting. So that's a really good example, because she got a huge bump, no question. She stepped on the national stage. She seized the opportunity. She is much more known, and she's probably getting more donors. She's definitely rising in the polls because of it, but she won the battle.
She won the battle, which is not bad. I mean, it's not bad. It's not terrible. But again, if I want to really get her to be more of an adult and not be the ranting child, which she wasn't, but the wounded adult that had a childhood experience. Not to say that it's wrong. We're all wounded. We're all limping in all different ways. Please. Our vulnerability, our humanity is essential to leadership. I mean, it's either wounded that you're able to, as an adult, really deal with your wound and to act in an adult way, or not to take a shot, but be a wounded president and make blame everyone else about your wound.
Right.
Because that's what Trump does.
Sure.
They're wounded. Those people caused you harm, and I'm going to do something about it. No, he's not. He's not going to do anything about it. And it's whatever he's going to do, whatever he's promising, is not going to be proportional, and it won't work.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, I can have a 12-foot, 20-foot, 90-foot wall on the border. It ain't going to work. Did he ever notice China, how that wall has really worked or not worked? No, it didn't work at all. Kinda.
Yeah.
And, and did it last? No. It's just, it's like, it's wow. Here's a talking point for if any of the candidates are listening. It's like, well, in the Great Wall of China, what did they use as fill for the Great Wall of China?
I don't know, actually. What did they use?
Anybody that died while building it. Really?
They entombed them in the wall? How about that? Well, that'd be a very interesting thing for a candidate to draw a parallel between,
just like today.
Oh my gosh. But even just the idea that
the metaphor
that China thousands of years ago built a wall, and it's old technology. It can be cast that way. It hasn't worked long term. It hasn't kept people out. All it served to do is be one of the few things you can see from space on Earth that's man-made. And you're going to try and reinvent that wheel?
Great testimony to, human beings doing something, stating something, committing to something. I mean, at one point, China had the largest naval fleet in the entire world. At one point.
Right.
It was, all the ships were made out of wood, but it was the largest fleet in the world.
Sure.
Of course, the next emperor lit all the ships on fire and went to isolationism. Wait, just like America is attempting to do now.
Wow. All right.
It's like read a history book, folks. Anyway, sorry.
Well, we're going to have fun when we get to debate between Republican and between Trump running for re-election and the Democratic challenger is. That's going to be great material a year from now. But
So purchasing truth, a big part of the candidate's truth and the four horsemen of the apocalypse. I mean, these four horsemen, the criticism, the defensiveness, the contempt, and the withdrawal. The big challenge, Tom, is that these four things, what they do is they set up a narrative that basically gets them battling against each other. And let me show you what I mean by that is they get it battling between each other because when a person, and as I put this on the screen, what happens is that we get these 4 points of view that start arguing between each other. Criticism, contempt, start fighting with each other. Defensiveness and withdrawal start fighting with each other. That's currently happening right now. Defensiveness is fighting with withdrawal in the court systems to get people to come in you got to subpoena them. Well, subpoena is the defensive position. You have to fight.
Yeah.
And they're going to lock in. So I got 2 horsemen already sitting in there. Contempt. Well, I mean, Trump is doing criticism, contempt back and forth. They are doing this to me. Isn't it a shame? Isn't they're the blame? They're the wrong person. Contempt, criticism, contempt, withdraw. It's keeping the Democrats in a defensive prosecutorial position. It's a different time now than it was, but it is the essential challenge that we have as human beings is we need to apply compassion and empathy as this battle shows up, because that's the thing that gets us back to having a healthy adult conversation, which we're not actually having now. Does that make some sense?
Makes complete sense. And so is that really the issue? I mean, it seems like it's the issue not only for these candidates who are jockeying for position and trying to climb to the top of the heap, if you will, as a Democratic candidate trying to get to the top of the polls, but also as a country. It seems the four horsemen are being used by the current administration to keep us polarized, to keep us opposing each other and not working together.
That's correct. And we're getting pinned there because we are doing the best we can as human beings to really trying to fight the battle a little bit better. Okay, so let me share this again so I can show you, because what just showed up in my head is that mindset that's needed. So if you say a criticism sentence in my direction, and I have an adult language that sees through the criticism and is able to give it a little bit of validation because it is true. Senator Harris went through that experience.
Right.
The first thing that any candidate could have said to draft off of what she just did was what Senator Harris went through is exactly what we're doing and dealing with in South Bend. We're dealing with the same thing. For many Americans, the needle hasn't moved at all from what Senator Harris went through to what we're dealing with in South Bend. That's what Mayor Pete could have said. We're doing the best we can, just like Now, watch how he's going to draft off of Joe Biden. Just like Vice President Biden went through when he was dealing with the same issues back then in the 60s, 70s. Same issues. How do we get America's and the people that we have here to collaborate and cooperate more effectively? Now, Mayor Pete is now gaining 10 points. They're all moving up in the point. And the ones that are sitting on the sideline that don't know what to say, that don't know how to be in an adult conversation, they're all on the stage in the position of withdrawal, trying to think, how can I get my talking point in? That's all they're thinking about. How can my talking point doesn't fit. How do I no, talking point. You don't need a talking point. Be present to the moment of pain. Isn't it? Be present to what is happening. What is happening is the question was asked. And as a leader, you need to be present to the moment of pain. Don't be present to what the talking point you need to reinforce right now. Be present to what's alive right now.
Yeah, in that forum, you barely get a minute to speak or respond to anything. You don't have the ability to have the conversation you want to have. You got to go with the conversation that's happening right there, don't you? You have to respond, like you're saying, in the moment. So are there some sort of tragic examples of some candidates that really were ill-equipped and don't seem to have the communication skills necessary?
Well, you can, if any of the I'm thinking of several that are coming in my mind specifically, so I'm trying to pick which one.
Sure.
So my mind is going like, okay, here's where they all were coming through with their talking points, trying to make their talking points, but using the language of criticism or defensiveness or contempt and withdraw to try to get the job done. Instead of using and allowing compassionate truth to lead the narrative. Compassionate truth, I'm thinking of Marianne Williamson right now, would have looked like, I can really appreciate all the wonderful doctors that are doing the best they can to deal with the health crisis and the crisis in our system, in our healthcare system. But it's clear we need to get on the positive side of this thing. We need to start talking about the causes, not always dealing with the effect of it. What I would do as president is I would launch a health care system where we focus on health. What does health look like? What does health food look like? How do we keep our chemicals out of our body? How do we keep and protect the environment? Let's talk about the health system, not the sickness health system. She criticized the system she wants to change. Right. Instead of saying, why don't you just honor where we are and know that we've funded and we have reinforced and have paid people to fix sickness after they're sick, not before it.
Right.
Now, when a person leads with criticism, and even though it's true, it's not helpful. Her statement was true, and what made her statement even wobbly is that she did it from the framework of criticism, not from the framework of compassion for the system that's so. The same thing for the insurance companies. There's hundreds of thousands. There's over 1 million people working in the medical insurance business that are dealing with these forms. All of those people, we got to get them to support each other so it goes better. They're voters too. They're hearing, you're going to take down my job?
Right.
I've been processing these forms, and how's that going to work? You're literally scaring 1/6 of the economy to say we're taking that 1/6 away. How is that not affecting the limbic part of their brain going like, well, I don't like Trump, but at least he's not taking away what I have.
Right.
Or he's not, what's going to happen to my job in processing insurance forms? Because that's all I do all day. I'll vote for the person that is more stable with my job than the person that wants to change everything and make it better that I don't know what it's going to look like. I'd rather just do the status quo. Thank you very much.
Their need for safety is not being met by Marianne Williamson criticizing their industry.
It's like we are going to take what is available to us right now. We're going to work off the foundation of insurance that our nation, private insurance. We're working off that foundation. And we're going to take the best of those processes and still allow people to choose to have those systems in place. We're also recognizing that there are other systems that are working better than ours. And we're going to take the best of those things because that's what Americans do. We take the best of things and we make them better.
And that's them right there. I love it. And, interesting thing, and I don't get why anybody's talking about it. Again, it becomes very polarizing thinking. Absolute has to be this way or that way. Can't be in the middle. Because as I understand it, a lot of the countries that have a very strong public healthcare system also still have a private insurance system on top of that.
They do.
And it works very well. It doesn't have to be either or. You can have, if you're Bernie, you can have Medicare for all, but still have a private supplemental, industry on top of that.
Now, here's how Bernie could get 10 points back that he lost. Here's Bernie's next message. Bernie it would be something like this. It's so important to stabilize our healthcare system. And we're going to stabilize it and take the best practices in order to stabilize, reform, and restructure it so that whatever level of protection that American wants, they get to choose to do. It's so important that if someone is feeling scared and fearful and they want to spend extra money to have private insurance, they get that choice and that option. If certain doctors would like to work inside that structure, it's so important for them to have the choice to do that and to get to pay the value that they would like to get paid. See, the doctors are fearful too because they're thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the money in the pipeline? Because right now, they're getting paid through the insurance folks. And yeah, they're getting the insurance people, but they also, how do you get the high-end money too? Because I'm sitting with my money problems and the way my economy has worked and the way I have wealth as a doctor. So the voices of criticism and defensiveness and contempt and withdrawal, Tom, really force politicians into fighting between the values instead of having an adult best practices mindset. Instead of getting to the adult narrative of, yeah, you'd like to get paid and we have a bigger issue right now. We're trying to fix the bigger issue and we still want to get you paid too.
Well, and it seems that there were so many opportunities for candidates not only to, try to I'm going to restate that. Sorry, guys. Edit this. It seems that during that debate, there were so many opportunities for candidates to address the issue that was being discussed or the question they were being asked if they communicate their message properly, use communication skills, which some of them don't seem to have, and not only indicate their position and come out on top, but also at the same time be really attacking the current administration, which should be the whole goal of all of these candidates, right?
Yeah, the awareness, the awareness piece is that you've got to be the person that can lead on the stage, that has access to certain sentences that you can use when a criticism style president, a contempt style president, that is going to continue his message all the way through to the end. He is not changing his message. He's not.
Right.
He's not going to gain awareness or consciousness. He's not going to become, quote unquote, more presidential. Everybody was hoping that he would. No. He's been using these four things and using the various different systems to get around him, to use the voice of criticism and defensiveness and contempt and withdraw. I mean, to even bounce it to Kellyanne Conway, uses the four things all the time. All the talking points on, Fox News, even all the other newscasters, regrettably, start arguing between criticism, contempt, and withdrawal. This exhausts me from time to time if I don't put my compassionate ears on. I'm going like, why are you picking? You have just made it worse. Yes, you were fighting for truth, but that's not helpful right now. It's not essential to do truth first, because compassion for the tragic sentence is essential in order to have an adult conversation. Because otherwise, we have middle schoolers fighting on a playground. If I don't mind labeling and diagnosing people right now.
Well, but it is really so true, though, and it is to me tragic that these aspiring leaders do not understand this.
This is where Elizabeth Warren has the potential to run out of steam, because she has a plan and several different plans and things like that. A plan is a target. That's all it is. It's a target. Because a plan executed is great when you have everybody on board.
Sure.
But when you don't have people on board, as if, Tom, you're as a business owner and myself, you can have as many plans as you would like, but as a business owner, if your team is not on board with that plan, then what winds up happening is that you're in big trouble.
I have seen it many times in business, and not just with my own business, but other businesses that I work with, where the owner of a business, you would think, hey, he is the king of his castle. He's the owner of the business. He can dictate, because it's not a democracy in business. Yep. He can say, you're my employees, you will do this. Well, guess what? At some point, you can be that dictator, but if your employees are not on board, it is not going to happen. They will undermine you. They will sabotage it, even if they don't realize they're doing it.
Criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and withdrawal right at your plan, right at your mission. Then, by the way, the owner, not having language awareness or leadership awareness, jumps into criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and withdrawal about his employees.
Right.
About the same team that needs to execute. Regrettably, these languaging styles, criticism, you should have. Blame, judgment, criticism, defensiveness. I didn't do it. That's not true. How could you call me this? I'm not this thing that you're calling me. Well, don't even get in that dogfight. Be compassionate to what the accusation was. I mean, as a person, see, the turn is that as Senator Harris said, as an African American on this stage, I think I can say a thing or two about this thing. The spotlight is now on her. Wonderful. She she did wonderful with what she said. Now, as an African American, this is what the experience. As a vice president, you did this. Draft off of his credibility. Don't take his credibility down. Draft off of it. Get rid of the rest of the field within 40 seconds.
Yeah, which is called being a leader, right?
Being a leader. As that person that did that was that person. Draft off of him. Take his votes, but take his votes compassionately. Watch this. As an African American, this is my experience. This is what happened. Watch what happens next. As a human being, as all of us are standing up on stage, fighting for equality, because I believe that we as Democrats are fighting for equality. She is now drafting all of their votes too.
Wow.
As a human being, take it to the next things, take their votes.
And so rather than trying to divide them on stage and to score points and wound them and be the leader on stage, I mean, rather than trying to win and walk away the least wounded, you could actually lead and bring everyone along, and leading by example would probably lift you up higher.
Yeah. Lift higher. Lead. Don't be known as that African American gal who's president. Be known as a human being that is leading a collaborative, cooperative country. How about that? Do that. See, there are people who are wounded because they don't know how to be in the same room with an African American person because they're afraid to say the wrong thing, as well as their own guilt and shame for dealing with their own fears and anxieties because they've been influenced. They need the healing too. They have the uncomfortability of knowing that they've had problems in the past dealing with race. Well, be a human being that I could come up to and say, God, I really appreciated you included me in your story of the 4-year-old that's being, or the 6-year-old or the 10-year-old or 12-year-old that was being left out of playing. Yeah, my mom said that same thing to me, and it really cost me a really good friendship when I was growing up. Be the person to heal the other side, not to divide the other side.
Wow.
And to drive in the guilt and shame. Just saying.
Well, I think it's somewhat inevitable that we're going to continue to have more tragic or witness more tragic conversations in these early debates as the field gets, weeded down. And it'll continue to be fun to sort of, watch that, analyze it, and learn from it, won't it? Well,
yeah. And the next step will be the application of compassion and empathy that causes an impact and a adult response that is able to mitigate the voices of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and withdrawal. And what we'll go into next, Tom, is what to say, what each candidate's message reimagined. That's what we need next, okay? And how to construct that impacting messaging, and who we are as Americans and as people, as human beings, and and the why. The big why here is, why this alternative, this unknown, this unaware communication pattern is needed to restore truth and get back on the path of a collaborative nation. That's the thing that's needed. I mean, this is the Teflon that is coated on the frying pan. This is what's needed to make the Teflon piece, because as the current president, President Trump, is going to realize that criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and withdrawal will win you a battle, but it will not win you a war. His brand damage is so huge, they're taking the name off of many of his buildings, and he doesn't know about it. He doesn't. He's going to go like, why is this name off of here? Well, because the investors voted, and they voted you out, and they took your name off of it. Because it cost them money.
Sure.
So he's losing the war. He's had enough money to win battles, but what he doesn't realize is that type of recognition, that type of respect, that type of acknowledgement, the same as a bully, that's the label, the same as a bully, is it runs out until somebody stronger than you, kicks your butt or throws you in jail. That's what happens next. It's coming, but, it's a painful part of our nation that we're going to have to deal with next.
All right.
Hey, next time, Tom, we're going to do something, and on a positive note, how empathy and compassion is going to reduce the voices of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and withdrawal. And let's get back to the truth about healing America and what real leadership looks like. I mean, that's really where we got to get to next.
All right. Well, I look forward to that. I'm enjoying this a lot. Thanks so much, Bill.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.